Jonesey Games here. I'm here to talk about the Order of the Broadsword, which is a 5th edition solo adventure that's now available on DriveThruRPG. This is perfect if you want to play solo, you can't find a DM, or if you're new to the game and you want to just get a feel of how the mechanics were going to kind of work when you actually get to sit at a table with a real DM. So like I said, it's available on DriveThruRPG right now. The Order of the Broadsword is a choose-your-own-adventure type module. It's a rather linear story. There's 3 major plot lines that are going to happen, and you get to pick and choose based on the decisions that you make which order those happen in, and you'll be able to affect the individual pieces of the plot line themselves. But just so I'm perfectly clear and transparent, they're all going to end up at the same spot at the end, albeit you'll have different items or different monikers or something like that. You'll get a different outcome. But the end game, there's really only 2 different flavors for the ending, and it's going to be the same no matter what. Just to kind of set expectations with that. So if you've never played a choose your own adventure book, back in my day, the big ones were Goosebumps. I know they had a really good run of them, and I used to love them as a kid, but they go way back, and I think it's perfect for Dungeons and Dragons, or any other RPG. Like I said, this one's specifically for 5th edition. So the way that you play is, again, it's just you. You don't need a DM. I have some options in here that you can have multiplayers. You could have 2 people play and not use the DM, use it solo and, without a DM. Or you can have 1 person play the DM that's reading these descriptions and acting as the monsters. But the important thing here is when you're playing in solo mode, I've implemented something else in the combat that kind of adds a really weak pseudo AI to control the monsters. That's called the decision roll. So on each of the monsters' turns in combat, you have an extra roll at the beginning. You'll roll a d20, and on each stat block, there are a list of actions that will happen based on what you roll. So that's how you decide what the monster is going to do on their turn, or your allies. You also get some allies, and they'll run the same way. So this adventure is designed for a 5th edition character between levels 3 and 5. If you don't have a character or you don't know how to make one, there are tons of resources online. Or if you just don't feel like actually rolling one up, I recommend fastcharacter.com. It's a pretty great little web app that will generate a character for you. It's got a bunch of little settings in there you can put in. You could pick your race and your class and your background and a bunch of other things. But so you can do as little or as much as you want to if you want to just get right into playing. So if you've never played a choose your own adventure, they're really pretty simple. What you're going to do is start on the first page here, read this little A Kingdom Divided blurb that kind of gives you some background on what's happening in the story, and then you go straight to number 1. You'll read number 1, and at the bottom here, you'll see 2 options, and you follow those to the next section, and that's how the story progresses. You just keep reading that over and over again, making decisions. Some of them you will actually make, some of them will be dice rolls, and sometimes your hand's going to be forced. You're not going to have a choice but to go to a particular way. So for example, we'll just go ahead and start off the adventure here at number 1. I won't read the backstory, so it might not make a whole lot of sense, but it starts off at number 1. You awaken from a deep sleep to the smell and sound of a burning thatch roof. Startled and confused, you grab your pack and run into the cobbled street of the castle town, and you see nothing but destruction. Flames and ashes engulfing everything as far as the eye can see. You hear the sound of hooves. You hear the sound of hooves and metal quickly approaching you. The rider's horse lets out a deafening bray as he approaches, intent on trampling you. Make a DC 15 dex check. So in that situation, I roll a d20. I got an 18, plus my 2 dex modifier gives me a 20, so I succeeded the DC 15. So since I succeeded here, number 1 tells me to go to number 2. So I swiftly dodge the swish of cold iron that narrowly misses my head as the dark armored rider thunders past me. I watch helplessly as the rider slashes an elderly man across the belly with a mighty sword as he continues his path towards the castle gates. So this is kind of how this whole thing is going to work. You make these decisions based on and it's going to push the story into different directions. So I'm going to go ahead and skip down a little bit so that I can demonstrate how the decision roll works for combat here. We'll go to number 14 and just start right off. So it says, you're engaged in combat with a lightly armored goblin. Use the armored goblin raider stat block for the combat decisions. So then we go right into combat, and this is going to be standard fare for whatever system you're making. So I'll go ahead and make my initiative roll for myself. that puts me at a 10. I'll make one for the plus my 2, so I get 12. And we'll roll again for the goblin. All right, and he's going to get a 13. So that tells me that the goblin's going to go first, which is perfect. We can get right into the decision roll here. So what I'm doing, I usually play this on tabletop. I use actual real dice, but yeah, you play however you want to. It's your game. So I've got this all written out here. The goblin's got 10 HP. I've got 32. So I'll lay this out here. All right, so for the goblin's first turn, I don't know if you're actually able to see this in the stat block here, but I'm looking at this piece here. It's got the decision roll information in it. So I will roll again for the goblin's decision roll. And he comes up with a 2. So the decision roll here on a 1 through 10, he's going to use Shield Bash. And it also says that the Goblin Raider will always attempt to move into melee range during combat. So another thing, this was designed to be used in the Theater of the Mind, but nothing stopping you from setting up a little map and minis or, you know, little tokens, whatever you want to use. You can do that too. So we've decided that the Goblin, and his first action of combat, is going to run up right next to me and use his Shield Bash attack. So now that we know that, now combat proceeds as normal. So we'll do his roll to hit, which comes out as a 10 plus 3, and well, my AC is 15, so he misses. But what would normally happen here is standard fare. You would roll your attack to hit. If it hits, then you roll your damage dice. And this works the same way for any monsters that you encounter as well as any allies. Now, all of that being said, this is just an option of play for you. Of course, you can always run the monsters by yourself. You most likely will get a more tactical result out of that, but it's kind of nice to let the dice decide for you also. I think that any fantasy fans will really enjoy the kind of campy aspect. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Really going for that those classic sword and sorcery vibes. Kind of make you feel like you're Sunday morning again playing Dungeons and Dragons with your friends. So that's my whole spiel on the Order of the Broadsword. If you've got to scratch that tabletop RPG itch and you have a character sitting there, there's virtually no setup time. Crack open this PDF, start reading. You're going to get a campy 1970s inspired sword and sorcery adventure right at your fingertips. I hope you have a great time with it. Thank you.